This is Driving Solutions, exclusively on CBTNews.com.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Understanding the behavior and sentiments of car buyers is crucial for dealers aiming to stay ahead. Joining us now with insights derived from Urban Science's 2024 Harris Poll study and analysis is Eric DeMont, Global Practice Director at Urban Science. You've seen him here before at CBT News. Eric, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to join us once again.
Jim, thanks for having me. Always great to be here.
Sure. So you have got a presentation that I've heard a lot about, and I would love for you to share with our audience what it's all about. And then if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you some questions as we go along here.
Yeah, happy to. We've had the opportunity to share this during the Kane and Friends event, as well as the Digital Marketing Strategies Conference last month. So happy to bring it to your viewers here as well, Jim.
Great. Well, I'll let you start when you're ready.
All right. So, I thought first it'd be good to ground everyone on who Urban Science is. Most dealers know us as we've been delivering solutions to the industry for over 40 years. Solutions like Market View, Financial View, Lead View, et cetera.
Yeah.
And more recently, our Sales Alert and Traffic View solutions that we've been talking to you about on the show. Probably the most important thing to remember for your audience, though, is that Urban Science is the steward of the Data Hub new vehicle sales, which contains 95% of new vehicle and actually now 98% of all CPO vehicle sales.
Wow.
From across the industry, from across the country, collected on a near real-time basis.
Fantastic.
Which is just a fancy way. Yeah, it's just a fancy way of saying, the next day or the day after the next day, we basically have all the sales in the US in our analytical database that power our solutions.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so we're happy to have that, and we utilize that to power our solutions, and our solutions really are designed based upon what's happening in the marketplace. And one of the ways that we keep our pulse on the marketplace is conducting an annual study with the Harris Poll this year, where we interview 250 dealers and 3,000 automotive shoppers to really get a sense of what's happening in the industry from both the seller and buyer perspective. And we go to market with this early in the year. We collect all the insights and have it ready for publication in the late spring time period. And usually around this time is we have the opportunity to share it out with industry thought leaders and others like yourself to kind of give back to the industry on what we're hearing and seeing and happening.
Sure.
As well as how that then informs our product strategy and our product roadmap. So the first thing I wanted to kind of level set on is inflation continues to dominate both the auto buyer public and dealers alike.
Sure.
So we asked dealers, what are the biggest concerns they have around purchasing and leasing today? And the answers from the consumers in the green on the left-hand side of the screen here. And I would say all of those responses are related to the affordability crisis that's happening. Affordability is real, right? So how much do vehicles cost? How much do they cost to fuel and service and insure? All of those are the top four responses from a consumer standpoint.
Sure.
And similarly, dealers are saying that affordability crisis is real too, whether it be economic factors, again, affordability of the vehicles and gas prices, as well as insurance and cost of service. So those are real concerns that continue to be top of mind for consumers.
Yeah.
And dealers alike. As we kind of look at some other questions that we asked is, usually consumers consider just over 2 dealerships. We asked them for the dealership that you decided not to buy at. So you consider 2, you bought at 1. What would have made you choose the one that you didn't go to? What could have they done differently to make you buy there? And what we see, like the far and away, the biggest response, 65%. Give me the best price.
Yeah.
And so maybe not surprising given the affordability crisis, but the magnitude of that, 50% higher than the next most favored response leads me to believe, as a closeted economist, that's what my undergrad was in, that that pricing is something that it can be used by dealers to differentiate themselves because consumers are looking at that as a point of differentiation.
Sure.
Now you could say, hey, how does that change over time? If we would have been talking a couple years ago, predictably given COVID and availability and inventory shortages, it would have been, is the vehicle available?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of dealers that I talked to are like, hey, we think we have a very differentiated perspective in terms of our relationships with the consumer, or our salespeople relationship with the consumers. And those are important, but maybe not as important as we would like to think. Maybe loyalty isn't as high as we would like to think it is, or as important as it is. And pricing is really important, and it's transactional in nature, yes, but I need to consider that as I determine how I want to respond to my leads. And then, one that all the dealers that I talk to kind of react interesting with is, the quality of I guess, the modernness of the store as well. And, we have all getting pressures from manufacturers to make investments. It's interesting here what the consumers are saying about that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Because boy, every OEM thinks you got to have a Taj Mahal to sell cars from, right? And that's just
right.
not up on the list of consumers, obviously.
Yeah, and frankly, what do you have to do with price when you build the Taj Mahal?
That's
and
right.
Is that self-defeating in terms of what consumers are really looking for?
Yeah, for sure.
This exhibit, and this is the last one I have in this kind of in this mindset. We asked, are consumers going to change their plans to buy due to this affordability crisis? And when we looked at auto buyers, again in green on the left-hand side there, 55% said they're likely to change, half. What strikes me, though, is that 86% of us think that the consumer is going to change their mind.
Yeah.
So what I'm calling this is consumers are resilient, meaning they don't like that the prices are high. They are in an affordability crisis, but darn it, I'm still going to buy my vehicle.
That's right.
It is a need, but it also is a desire. Does anyone have a need for an $80,000 car? Probably not.
Especially
they have a desire
when you look
for that.
at some of their trade-ins that I remember appraising vehicles when I was on the retail side. I would get into a car. I'm like, why are these people shopping for a new car? This car is in great shape, but it's just American, the average American consumer wants to trade every 30 or 36 months, right?
That's right. Yeah. Consumption, it's a consumption economy.
Sure.
And we want what we want. And we think, man, oh man, we finally hit the tipping point where they're not going to buy on this affordability thing. But to me, this is saying that there's still more resiliency out there than we think.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised by that, and that should give us confidence, right? And the fact that SAR is just under 16 million or 13 million retail, it's a healthy environment out there.
Yeah.
Maybe top 4, top 5 profitability years that we're still going to see.
That's right.
And from our studies that, we kind of line up with that. Some other things that would suggest a resilient consumer that I saw is, we think that they're going to look for more budget-friendly options than that they're reporting.
Mm-hmm.
We think that they may look for better technologies than what they're looking for, than what they're reporting. And of course, we think they're going to postpone the purchase of the vehicle more than they say they are.
Yeah.
And so, let's lean into this. The going's good still right now. Let's take advantage of all that and make sure that we're being aggressive in our pursuits of the consumer.
Sure.
And so usually I pause here and ask the dealers, how is this environment affecting your store? This is certainly not consistent across the country and across brands. And so I usually ask them, are the pressures easing? Are consumers starting to back off? Sure. And I'd be really curious, Jim. I know you talk to dealers day in and day out, hourly basis. I'm curious to what you're hearing. Yeah,
most dealers report to me that it's not what it was a year ago or 2 years ago with regard to gross profits or even the demand for vehicles, which we know. And dealers have got to work that much harder for gross profits. And affordability is still at the top of everybody's list of concerns, both on the retail dealer side as well as the consumer side. That said, to your point, consumers still want what they want. And it is interesting to see as these cars continue to get more and more expensive and more technology gets put into them, how many different ways are we going to be able to offer this vehicle and make it affordable for the average family out there? With the average price of a new car being almost $50,000, we better be talking about an aggressive lease program or a subvented program on interest rates or longer terms. We're already at 84 months as almost a standard. So it really is interesting to see these numbers come from you, because it kind of reflects what's happening right there in the showroom floor every day that dealers are dealing with, right?
I totally agree. And to me, this just makes the role of the sales consultant even more important.
Oh, 100%.
Because they have to be able to answer those consumer concerns around technology, around affordability, and other issues to help them into the car ultimately.
Yeah.
And so, we got maybe a little lazy during COVID. We have a lot of new people on our staffs, and
that's right.
Investing now in training up the team and getting them comfortable and proficient and being able to help these consumers who have concerns, I think, is critical for success.
Yeah, and in fact, your number there of 65% for best price, usually price goes hand in hand with the presentation and the value that salesperson has built in that vehicle. And what's interesting is that we do have now a group of people, or a generation now of salespeople out there coming from COVID, that they did forget how to sell. And I don't need any emails on this, obviously, but it's true. And every dealer has told me that wow, we have to either get rid of our sales team, which they don't want to do, or completely retrofit their training for this new normal that we're in, because no longer can you just point at the car and point at the sticker and say, hey, you want it or you don't want it, because we got somebody right after you that'll take it. And you actually have to sell the features and benefits of that vehicle. And as more and more salespeople do that and hone in on that, well, then price all of a sudden starts to take a back seat, right?
That's right. And we're going to get into some of the offerings that we have that help from that training perspective. So sure. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about that. All right. So moving on, we ask consumers, what could change your decision on which dealers you were considering. And, for time immemorial, when you ask about this, is how much can I get from my trade? Can you get me financing? Is it inventory? i.e., what's my best monthly payment?
Right.
So no surprise there. Those are things that we heard again. But there was a line here that kind of crept back in that, we're all scared of, because, both the factory and dealers alike are scared of this word, because this means lower gross profits for us. And this was not on the list, 3 years ago during COVID, and it's starting to, and it certainly was pre-COVID, and it's starting to creep back up here again. So I did want to point that out, and I also wanted to maybe provide a little bit of comfort for those who are scared about that word and other things. We ask some follow-up questions, and so we ask consumers, if we wanted you to take an action, whether it's a test drive, activate a recall, come in for maintenance, etc. And then we said, and if we gave you different incentive values to do that action, would it be motivating to you? Mm-hmm. And so what I'd like to share here with my clients, my dealer friends, is that even small incentives can make a big difference in driving consideration for a consumer to come to your store. Yeah. It doesn't take thousands and thousands of dollars of incremental extra rebates or incentives on the hood, but we can get them to come into this showroom, let's say, for example, with a test drive. 87% of consumers find that $50 is enough to get them off the couch and come in and take a look.
$50.
I mean, who wouldn't pay that all day, all night?
That's exactly right. Boy,
to have a high quality lead come in and talk to your sales team.
That's right. But on average, 87% said $50. That's amazing, because it's I think a lot of dealers think it's going to take a lot more than that to get that customer in, to try the vehicle, and it's just not the case based on your survey.
That's right. And what we see historically, Jim, is actually as there's a sweet spot for test drives, at least. There's a sweet spot somewhere between 50 and maybe 100, 125 bucks, where you drive a lot of interested people into the showroom. Yeah. You go a little bit higher than that, you're going to drive people who are just wanting the $250 or they want the incentive. Yeah. But if it's just low enough to not get those tire kickers to come in, but
Sure.
instead motivate the real shoppers to select you over over the other store they were considering, that brings in a high quality lead that usually converts on a per sale basis for, less than $300, oftentimes less than $200. And
Yeah.
as we know, boy, oh boy, that's a good deal.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's exactly right. If I were a dealer, I would just pack that dollar amount right into the cost of the car and work the deal accordingly.
That's right. So I usually pause here again and say, how are incentives impacting your business? And oftentimes this varies by brand, but what are you getting the sense? What are you hearing from your dealer friends?
Look, there's no question. Ever since the first Model T rolled off the assembly line, right? Money and incentives will drive product. And sales. That's for sure. If an OEM wants to get rid of a vehicle, they got to put money on the hood, and guess what? Those cars have a tendency to go bye-bye. Same thing internally, as you know. If there's aged inventory on the used car lot, and the dealer says, "Hey, every single one of these cars gets a $300 mini deal or a $400," guess what? Your aged inventory problem is then over with. So dealers get that, they understand it, and of course consumers do too. We see the numbers increase in terms of the number of ups that go into showrooms and the inquiries made when all of a sudden a major manufacturer announces 0% for 60 months or something like that. So there's definitely a place for it. There's no question about it. We would be, I think, a little naive if we said we don't need incentives to roll cars. We definitely do. It's a big part of the business.
Yeah. And the good news is it doesn't have to be thousands of dollars, and it can be very targeted
on
certain, as you mentioned, certain age inventory, or against certain models, or even certain customers that you're or sources that you're finding are hard to close.
Yeah.
I think that could be a good application as well.
That's right. Yep.
So some other research I just want to share quickly. This hasn't changed much over the years. On average, consumers are considering almost 2.5 brands. About half of them are submitting a lead online. And the top reason, by the way, for not submitting a lead online is they want to talk to someone in the showroom first, or they want to take a test drive first. So to me, that still means you have a very resilient lead management process in the industry. Leads are still the lifeblood of most, if not all, dealers, and consumers are submitting on average about 2.5 leads for every car that they buy.
Okay.
Which means ultimately you kind of got about, when we go down here, the number of dealership visited when you buy a car is 2. So when you have true in-market shoppers who visit, because not everyone who visits ultimately ends up buying, but for those of you who buy, that means you got about a 50% shot.
Yeah.
If you can bring high quality traffic into the showroom.
That's right.
And so that means, to me at least, leads are still very resilient. And it's not just me saying that. So we asked dealers that too, because we wanted to understand what they think about leads. And 75% of them are saying that they are even more important today than they were 5 years ago.
Yeah. No question about it.
So diving a little bit more into leads. Oops, sorry. Got a little ahead of myself there. Diving a little bit more into leads, about half of us are saying it's harder to close. We can appreciate that given the changes we've already talked about in terms of inventory and affordability, et cetera. But then very interesting here is how much time are we spending? On average, we're spending 3.5 weeks on follow-up. And each time we follow up with a consumer, we're spending 3 to 5 minutes, whether it be a call or a text, or even an email. Still, some people communicate that way. 3 to 5 minutes. And then when you add all that up, what we find is, generally speaking, there's still quite a bit of time spent on the lead management process. Even, and usually I go into AI a little bit here, but even with AI co-pilots and other assistants, we still are taking, a fair amount of time, human time, interacting with the leads, especially as they get closer to the end of the funnel. So my question that I usually ask is, are we generating enough high quality leads, and are you getting a good ROI on the leads that you're buying right now? Is it possible to get enough good leads? What are your thoughts?
It depends on who you ask in the dealership. So, if you ask the salespeople, then they'll tell you, no, we're not getting enough good quality leads. It's because salespeople, by nature, they want that new, fresh customer always coming in, and the better the quality lead, the easier their job is to sell. But if you ask the marketing department, or you ask the BDC, they'll say the quality of the leads are there. I mean, and the numbers kind of prove that. It's a question now as to whether or not that sales department can close that lead. If I'm a salesperson and I can't close a lead, then I blame the quality of the lead. I don't blame my own selling skills. And that's been around for a long time, but it's a reality. So it really depends on who you ask in the showroom. But certainly based on your numbers, with the average person just shopping 2 dealerships, to your point, you have a 50% chance or greater of closing those deals. And then the question becomes, why didn't we? Was it money? Was it trade allowance? Was it interest rates? Was it something the salesperson did or didn't do? Was it the selection or the inventory of vehicles? There's so many things that go into that. But there's huge opportunity out there. Then there's huge opportunity in those numbers.
Yeah, so let's dive into that. You brought up some really good points. So we also asked, so this is dealers. We asked dealers, how satisfied are you with certain aspects of your business? And one of the things that we saw in terms of least satisfied, so this is at the bottom, things that you're least satisfied with, we saw a trend kind of emerge here. And knowing the status of all their leads, or knowing when a lead defected or bought somewhere else, was something that a lot of folks were frustrated with, or another way to say it, unsatisfied with.
Sure.
And to your point on who you ask, I thought it was very interesting that the guys on the floor had a very different perception, or were more frustrated with the lack of insights around, the status of the lead than maybe the general manager was. So I find that very interesting and telling, is that the folks that are on the front line saying, man, I wish I knew the status. Because the last thing I'm sure you'd want to do, or did when you were selling cars, and that they're doing right now, is trying to get in contact with someone who's ghosting them, and just knowing that you're not going to get a response. I mean, that's such a defeating.
I know.
It's soul-sucking exercise that
you don't want to run.
I'd like to avoid that.
That's right, and it's not good to run out for somebody that wants to run out and grab that next customer, or that next lead, because you're so bummed over the last one, right?
That's right. So, and these are the things they're saying. I'm not going to go into these, but we have testimony after testimonial, people being frustrated with this outcome. And it's very real, because what we found, now that we have this data set of all the vehicle sales across the industry, and we are consuming leads from the CRM systems directly for our clients, what we found is that 17% of up. So those are leads that are 90 days or less, are 90 days or less old. And we look at their status, whether or not they're still open in the dealer system, but they bought elsewhere, because we have the RDR for it. 17% of the leads in the dealer CRM have already purchased elsewhere. So that frustration is very real, right?
Yeah.
We could say they're just the sellers and they're always saying the leads are bad. Well, guess what? 17% of their book has already purchased elsewhere, and that's why they're getting ghosted, and that's why they're getting frustrated, because they're spending all that time and they're out in market. And let's be honest, consumers aren't telling us when they buy somewhere else. We wish they would.
No.
But at the end of the day, they aren't.
That's right.
And so we're meant to divine that, or just assume because they haven't gotten back with us that they purchase elsewhere. We now know that it's 17%, and that's quite a lot.
Yeah, that's 1 in 5 basically.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so why, but maybe those are all the bad leads or something, right? But when we look at kind of behind the scenes of what that defection looks like, it's consistent across brands. Trust me on this, when we look at it across brands, it's plus or minus a couple percentage points.
Yeah.
Depending on brand, right around that 17%. Maybe just pausing real quick, I'd call out Mazda. Mazda generating an awful lot of traffic. And then you look at Nissan, and their defection rate is only 13%.
Yeah.
They're scrambling for traffic right now. So
That's right.
You can even kind of see through the defection rate that Nissan's closing a higher percentage, fewer are defecting, because they're in essence generating less traffic, whereas Mazda must be driving a lot of traffic, and there's a lot of defection because hey, Mazda, I'll take a look at that. I'll submit a lead. And so, maybe there's
Yeah.
a optimal level of defection where you're generating just the right amount of traffic. You're
Sure.
not buying too much,
Sure.
but you're getting enough. And so that's interesting, maybe to look at by brand. But again, it's, right around 17%. And then, the last thing I want to share with you is these defectors. I mean, they're a big deal because when you look at the kind of the demographics behind the defection, those defectors generally stated, the higher the defection rate, the higher the income level.
Huh.
The higher the defection rate, the higher the education level.
Interesting.
And the instances of home ownership.
Interesting.
And net worth. And so why is all that happening? My hypothesis on this is when you're a high value, high net worth individual, you have more options. You can get financing. It's not about payment as much. It's not about affordability as much. I have options.
Right.
And I'm shopping around.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment for sure. Somebody says, I can go anywhere and I don't, sometimes people go into a dealership and they start to really build a relationship with that dealership that says, hey, we can help you get into a car, okay, because of your credit or because you're upside down or your trade-in. Don't worry about it. We'll work with you. We'll get you in.
Right.
Well, the chances of that person deflecting now to another brand or another store is slim and none. But to your point, and it's valid, somebody can go anywhere they want and they have the money, they're going to do that.
And so when you lose one of those, you're like, oh man, that's a $20,000 bill that just walked out, because those are the ones that we're making the most money on.
Right.
And so being able then to know when to stop chasing, so that, by the way, if you stop chasing the 17% that are already left, what do you get to focus on? The 82% that are still in market.
Yeah.
And try to stop them from defecting before you lose more of the folks like this.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
And what I'd close on then is when we started to look at defection rates or deflection rates, I think, those words can be used interchangeably against sales effectiveness, whether or not you're selling to the, assumed level of performance, or if you're achieving the market share that you should be achieving. The more defection you have, the lower your sales effectiveness, meaning the lower share you have.
Yeah.
And when you look at it, another way with pump in, the higher your pump in, the higher your defection rate.
Yeah. So
oftentimes, there's nothing worse than pump in, right? Those are my consumers that are driving by my store.
Yep.
And they're buying somewhere else.
Yep.
Or
it's the worst.
I'm not getting my full market share. Boy, that's frustrating. How do I fix that? Decreasing your defection rate actually is, the math is here. It's correlated. If you fix your defection rate, you're going to have higher share and you're going to have lower pump in.
That's right. That's right. Especially now when we see inventory levels back to pre-COVID levels. Before you'd have somebody that goes to another dealership outside of your area because you didn't have the car or you couldn't get the car, but the other dealership does. But that isn't the case now. Now it's all about that customer experience and the follow-up and everything else that happens because chances are you got the car, right?
That's right. Well, to your point, I mean, everything is set up for you to succeed, and now we have to compete on the quality of our sales teams, on the ability to answer questions and to provide a great consumer experience. It's not just about having that inventory. And when you lose them, let's learn from that, because it's okay to lose. It's just not okay not to learn, because then you're just repeating it again and again and again.
That's right. That's right. I will tell you, just personally, shopped for a car. My wife and I, our lease was up, so we decided, okay, we're going to go out and shop for a car. And we hit about 5 different dealerships because we just didn't know which car we wanted. We were she wanted one type, I wanted another. We said, well, let's go out and shop cars. So we did a little bit more than the two stops at showrooms. We went to 5. And out of the 5 showrooms that we went to, we sat down with the individual salespeople. We demoed each car that we were looking at. And I'm sorry to tell you that out of 5 of those experiences, 2 followed up with us.
Oh, yeah.
So, here we are in 2024 with all of this technology, whether it be a text message or an email or a phone call or something, but to have only, 2 out of 5 follow up with us to say, what did you think? What can we reschedule? Can you come back in? What's it going to take? All of the wonderful questions that you want to ask somebody if you spend an hour with them. And that's a very sad commentary. Now, listen, it's just my wife and I. It's not I'm not urban science, but at the end of the day, it really is, I think, a very sad story that we can go into a dealership like that and not get followed up on. And so it's happening for sure.
That's right. And measurement, to me, it all starts with being able to identify that that's happening, right, Jim? And once you identify it, then you can fix it. And having simple, easy to use tools to help you understand where the gaps are, the outages are in your follow-up process, that's critical for success.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And to your point earlier, that when a dealer has got that information almost in real time as to what's happening, it is invaluable that they have that so they can make those changes. And it's not a question of, let's wait till the end of the month. Oh my gosh, this is what happened. Or let's wait till the end of the quarter. And that's kind of the way it used to be. But, it does, obviously, it doesn't have to be that way. So
yeah, and this is the last slide I have, and I won't go through all these, but imagine you're the BDC leader or the general sales manager, being able to have a fact-based, near real-time training conversation with your team who didn't follow up with Jim or saw that Jim left and bought somewhere else.
That's right.
Hey, what did you do? How did you talk to him? All those different types of conversations you can have on how the up went. What did they do? What didn't they do? That is going to be very instructional for us. And it's a better training leads to better performance, leads to better sales.
Yeah, no question about it, for sure. Eric DeMont, Global Practice Director at Urban Science. And for dealers that want to get the real skinny as to what's happening at your store, this is a great way to start. You might want to bring a tissue with you because some of it is troubling information, but you can't fix something if you don't know it's broken. And show me a dealership and I'll show you certain areas of the dealership that are broken. That's many cases the dealer doesn't know about. So Eric, that was a great presentation. Really appreciate you bringing it to us.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for watching Driving Solutions, exclusively on CBTNews.com.